Hey guys, it's Jace of the Forestry Project. In today's video, I want to discuss what a forester carries in the woods. This is going to be similar to our tools video, but this is more specific to what is in my vest and what do I use for cruising. So we're starting to get into how to inventory your property, and a lot of what I carry in my vest is specific to forest inventories, and there are some things that I think landowners might want to consider if they're interested in inventorying their property. And there's a lot of good benefits to having a forest inventory done. Now, I am also a strong advocate, as I said in the last video, a professional consulting forester can do it much quicker than you can. And yes, you have to pay them, but there is a level of accuracy that as a landowner you might not be able to get. But I understand that some people may have 10 acres they want, and they want to get out on it and do it themselves. So I want to go through the tools that will allow you to do that based off of what I learned in school. So let's get into it. One of the first things I highly recommend you carrying it in the woods all the time is something orange. So you've seen in our videos, I will wear my orange cruiser's vest, and I will wear the orange hat that you see behind me. Now, some people say, it's my land, I don't have to worry about it, and technically, you should not be wrong. I always go off the fact, though, of an ounce of prevention will go a long ways. And it's not like there hasn't been instances where people were illegally hunting on private property, and I don't want to risk it. So I always wear something orange. I try to wear multiple things orange, a hat, a vest. I'm fairly tall, so if you see a big hat going through the woods in a vest, I would hope no one would mistake that for an animal. So again, wear something orange. Now, getting specifically into measurements, there's a few different measurements that you will want from your property that will give you the information you need. One of those is tree DBH. DBH stands for diameter at breast height. That is the diameter of the tree at 4.5 feet off the ground. So where the tree base, the trunk, meets the ground 4.5 feet up is where we'll measure diameter. The other measurement is tree height. So that we can divide that up into a few different things. Typically, you'll either see merchantable height or total height. Now, as a landowner just wanting an inventory, you'll probably be working off of total height. Merchantable height really gets into the specific mill it's going to go to and how small of wood they will take. So if they take up to a 3-inch top, you would quit measuring the tree height at around 3 inches in diameter, and that's something you just kind of have to guesstimate, and you learn that based on just experience doing this over and over again. But for what most landowners do, they'll want total tree height, and then you can also look at, there's ways you can calculate the green growth of the tree, so how much of the percentage of the tree has leaves, and that will also give you information. So if you want to do that, you would technically have two heights: height of the tree stem or bole below the branching and leaves, and then total height of the tree. Those two numbers, you could then get proportion of green tree growth compared to non-growing. That can sometimes help you if you're trying to consider whether you're overstocked and you need to thin. But you can also, from the diameter of the tree and the height of the tree, from diameter you can calculate basal area, and you can start looking at standing stock densities. So there's a lot of information to get into, and we'll get into that in a future video. but that's going to be the two big measurements that we want and what a lot of my equipment covers. Now, there's two pieces of equipment that don't fall into those categories, and that is a prism, and we'll get into that a little bit, but a prism is a different kind of plot. So you can have, when you go out in the woods and you're measuring trees, you will have different plots in different areas, and you've set that out ahead of time. And based off of the size of the plot, that'll allow you to calculate on a per acre basis. And those plots can be circular, they can be square. You can have strip cruising where you measure a line across your property. Every tree inside of a certain width of that line you measure. Or you can do prisms, which is you have a plot center, you go to it depending on the prism size. You'll look through it and you'll see whether a tree is out or in based off of whether they connect or not in the prism and out of the prism. If it connects, it's in. If it doesn't connect, it's out. If it's borderline, then you have to measure it, and based off of the prism, you'll have a length that you get to, but that's not really in the height of the DBH. And then a compass is not necessarily in that, but it's always useful to have, so I keep one with me for navigating to plots or just getting in and out of the woods. So without further ado, let's look at some of the ways that we measure tree DBH. Now, the way that I learned in school is using a logger's tape, and it is just a tape measure essentially that has on one side, needs oil, but on one side you can have your standard inches, and I've shown this in the beaver cage protector video. I've shown using this a little bit, but this is inches. And on the other side you actually have your diameters. So if you wrap this around the tree, whatever number you're at is your diameter. You don't have to do any math, which is always good. So the easiest way that we were taught to get diameter is using a logger's tape. Now you can just clip this onto your pants. We would always clip it onto a belt loop, and it stayed fairly well. Forestry Suppliers also carries a little platform that you loop into your belt, and then this clips onto that. It protects your pants. So if you're doing that a lot, that may be useful. We never used them, but just because we didn't use them doesn't mean much. And most of the stuff I get will come from Forestry Suppliers. Not saying they're the only company out there, but they're one of the main ones, and a lot of our stuff came from them. So the pros and cons to using the logger's tape. It's fairly simple. Just wrap it on the tree, whatever measurement you get, you're good to go. You can measure any tree size that you want, as long as it is that you're able to reach around, or you can actually get little nails that you wrap around the end of this, stick in the tree. You can walk around the tree and it'll hold your tape in place. And that's especially good on those bigger trees if you don't have someone else to hold this. Now, I'll get into in just a second another reason you might want the nail on this, and that can also come in handy as well. But let's move on to the next diameter. So another way you can get diameter is using a pair of calipers. So these calipers go from 0 to 18 inches. You can get these in different sizes. Different companies make these. This is also fairly straightforward to use. You walk up to the tree, open up your caliper. You're going to stick it around or over the tree, close this up to whatever diameter it is, and then read the measurement on it. So by using these calipers, you're able to get tree diameter fairly easily. Now, if you use these, typically I recommend, it seems like most people do like 2 or 3 measurements around the tree. That's what we did when we were using these at practicum. And you would measure on one side of the tree, go to the another side of the tree, because trees don't grow perfectly circular. You know, they may have a little bit of odd growth here or there. So having a few different measurements and then averaging those together is typically what you'll do with these tree calipers. But these can be decent diameter measurements. The only thing I don't like about these specifically is they're not quite as useful for other stuff. So, you know, pros and cons. This is not going to fall apart as easily as the logger tapes are. That's really my big complaint with these, is the quality is not really here with these. I wish it was. And the old ones, if you can get an old pair, work really well, but when we had them down at practicum, I think we had to return about half of them when we first got them because they wouldn't open all the way. And if you got them to, ours were 100 feet, which we'll get into why you might need 100 feet, it would break the spring and not wind back up. So, you know, pros and cons. But if you get one, try it out. At least in our experience, forestry suppliers took the ones that wouldn't work well back and replaced them. So you can always do that and get you one that works really good. Just know that the first time it may not, and I want you to test it. Now, the last way you can get tree height, or tree diameter, excuse me, is a Biltmore stick. Now, if anyone is familiar with forestry competitions in schools, they all use the Biltmore stick for their measurements. So on this side, it has diameters, and you can see those diameters going across that side. And what you do is, with the diameters facing you, you hold this up against the tree, and you have to look. So this one has a 25-inch reach. So if you hold this out 25 inches, it will give you the diameter. So you line this up with the base, or what I would typically do is line it up with like the 1, and then subtract 1 from whatever the diameter was. But wherever the tree is, gives you your diameter. So the edge, let's say it goes to 15. So you would have, if it went to the edge here, would be a 15-inch diameter. If you started at the 1, it would be 14. Now, the cool thing about these is they're fairly cheap. I'm actually going to show you how to make one yourself because they're not hard to make. We made them down at practicum. And as far as measurements go, I would much rather have my logger's tape, a tree height measurement, but you can get decent with this. So if you're not wanting to spend much, you might consider making your own Biltmore stick and just going that route. But another cool thing the Biltmore stick does is it will give you tree height. Now, it may not necessarily give you tree height to the nearest foot. Most of this is in logs. So if you look at this, it will give you 2 lines here. So if you see these 2 lines, one is that you walk out 66 feet, and one is that you walk out 99 feet, or a chain and a half. Now, this will say a chain. A chain is equivalent to 66 feet. So anywhere you see a chain, just substitute 66 feet. And with that, that's another reason why the diameter tapes come in really handy, because on that inch side, you can stick that into the tree if you have the tree now, walk out 66 feet, measure it with this, and get your tree height. Now, we were always told if the tree was above 66 feet tall, go out to the 99 feet, or I think technically we would mostly do 100 feet, but go out there and get measurements, and you would use the smaller sod for that. Now, this will give it to you in 16-foot logs. So it requires a little bit of math, but you can just do, 1 log, 2 logs, 3 logs, 4 logs, whatever the case may be. Multiply that by 16, so you can have 16, 32, whatever your height was, you would just multiply that by your number here. And you can kind of look, well, it may be halfway in between 3 or 4. So you would just, 3 times 16 would give you your 3 logs, plus 8 for a half. And you can kind of do it that way. So that is one way you can get tree height using the Biltmore stick. And that's one of the reasons I kind of like them. Maybe partial because I had to use it in high school for forestry judging. But you can get a lot of measurements off of a simple stick that you can make at home. They may not be as accurate as the new stuff, but if you're just needing inventories for management, this may be good enough. Now let's get into, if you don't want to use a Biltmore stick, some of the more technical tools for measuring tree height. So one of the things that we were taught how to use is a hypsometer, and it's a little, it almost looks like a compass. It has a little dial in there, and it has a lens that you look through. And how you use it is you look through it and you see there is a number on the side of this wheel, and depending on whether you're, again, 66 feet or 100 feet away, it will give you a tree height based off of that. And one side's in percentage, that's your 100, and one side is not, and that is your 60, or your 66, your chain. And you measure up and line, there's a center line, and you get it lined up with the tree, and that will give you your height. So this is what we used in school. It worked decent. I was never really a fan of these, but I know a lot of people are, and I really can't complain. It did everything I asked it to do. So, just understand you have to get used to it. You have to look through it, look through your other eye to see the tree. So it takes some practice, but you can use it, and it works. Now, one tool I don't have with me, I actually want to get to try it out. In my mind, I think it will work really well, is a digital inclinometer made by Nikon. Actually, I think a few different companies make them. Nikon's the most famous with it. It's essentially a rangefinder, and you get a couple of measurements. You range the tree, you measure to the base, shoot to the top. It gets the angles, and through trigonometry, it calculates the tree height based off of how far away you are. Now, it is more expensive than this, so I think when I priced this, it was $160 to $180 for the analog hypsometer that you measure tree height with. And then depending on the size, diameter tape, this will be a few different prices, because you can get 50 foot, 75 foot, or 100 foot. Now, we got the 100 foot because we needed to walk out 100 foot to use the percentage side of our inclinometers. But if you didn't need to do that, you could get away with a 50 foot or a 75 foot. They weigh a little bit less and they're a little bit smaller. There's just some trade-offs here or there. But the cool thing about using the knock-on thing is you don't have to measure out your distance from the tree. Since it is shooting that first measurement as you're ranging the tree, you just walk back and shoot. Now obviously you want to be far enough away that it makes sense. So if it's a 100-foot tall tree, you don't want to stand 5 foot next to it and try to measure. That's going to be probably inaccurate, but you can use it instead of having to measure off your distance. Now, why do I mention that? And it all comes down to cost. So let's say your diameter tape is 70 and your inclinometer is 150. You know, we'll do rough measurements. You'd be, 320, 330. Let's just say 300 to 350 for these two setups. Somewhere right around in that range. Now, you can semi-replace these by going with that knock-on. How? If you take your knock-on and you range the tree, that gives you your tree height. And then they actually sell little diameter tapes, like 10 foot, but plenty big enough for what you need that will fit in the palm of your hand. You get your diameter that way and your tree height using the knock-on. Now, the knock-on is more expensive. It is typically right around $450. I have seen it on sale for right at $399, $400. So it is more expensive. So again, it all kind of comes down to, it's just like the tools. It's all in what you pay for. The Biltmore stick is cheapest. It's easy to use once you get the hang of it, and when I'll show you how to build one, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for how to get started using one of these. But it'll be the cheapest, especially if you make it yourself. This is kind of middle of the road, and then if you get more expensive, you can go, the knock-on. They make even more expensive things, but I don't really recommend that for just private landowners if this is not your business. Now, getting into your plots and your prism specifically, this little glass object is what a prism looks like. Maybe you can see it in my hand. It's kind of hard to show something clear to the camera, but you can have different sizes. So this is a 10-factor prism. Depending on what trees you're measuring will decide what prism factor you want to use. But essentially, you walk to your plot center, you hold this, and if it connects, the tree would be in and it would be counted. If it doesn't connect, it would be out and it wouldn't be counted. This will also kind of help you to calculate basal area a little bit easier, because you're just, essentially your factor is also your basal area square footage. So if you get 1, it's 10 square feet to the acre, and so on and so forth up. So these prisms are not that expensive. They're actually really, really handy potentially. Now, I don't know of many companies that still cruise with a prism, but for landowners, this can actually be a very useful tool that I want to get into and discuss more in a future video, but you can use this. Now, lastly, I carry a compass with me. You're able to get your direction, especially when I was in practicum, we navigated to our plots. So this was how we navigated. This is just a very simple. This is a Suntoe MC2, but there's a lot of good compass brands out there, so just get one that works for you. But I know I talk about phones and using them to get around on your property. Having a compass can come in handy, especially if your phone dies. Now, just for me in burning, I always carry a incident response pocket guide. This is for like wildland firefighting. Um, I'm thinking that any state or federal burn people have to carry this with them. I go ahead and keep it with me just in case. Um, it can be useful on prescribed fire as well. So that's essentially what I keep in my bag. Now, there's a few other things, I'll keep. I've shown in the tools video. I have a Garmin InReach Mini 2 that I keep in there just for communication in case I'm somewhere that my phone doesn't have service. And I'll typically keep a bottle of water or something with me, maybe some snacks. That just kind of depends on, how long I'm going to be out and everything else. But this is essentially what you might want to start considering if you want to get into inventorying your property. So guys, I hope you got something out of today's video. If you did, I encourage you, leave a comment asking questions about any of this equipment. I'd love to dive deeper on specific things and how to use each one. I will do some videos on how to use them, but definitely ask questions and leave comments about this. If you're a forester and you have any experience with any of this stuff, or you have ideas for other ways landowners can measure trees and inventory their property, drop that in the comments as well. I'm always looking for new ideas, and I'll be the first to tell you I don't know everything about inventorying and everything else. I have limited experience. So I would love that feedback. If you enjoyed today's video, I encourage you, please like the video, comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I'd really appreciate that. It benefits us as we're growing. And share this video to your friends and family members that you think will get something out of it. Until next time, happy management and God bless.